RainierAvenue Radio.world. And Mick, I thought last Monday in the seventh inning of that baseball game that I would be preempted today. I would be selling raffle tickets at T-Mobile Park. And then the Tide in baseball, your heart breaks so quickly. Thought we would have to have the show, What Are Students Doing Now, as they're focused on the World Series in Seattle. But no joy in Mudville. We have to come back next year, as we've done in my lifetime now, some 48 straight years. Welcome, Mick Hoffman, the Executive Director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. Happy Tuesday.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, no, that was a bummer. It reminded me of when we left the studio, one of our first shows. We were standing there and we saw Alvarez hit that home run and put us out that game. So, yeah, we're getting closer, but man, it hurts.
It does hurt, but next year, Mick, it's our year. We will be there. We will we will be preempted. I'm calling it out now. We will be preempting us. We will be having the Mariners in the World Series versus somebody. But today, this gives us the opportunity on October the 28th, the Student Athlete Voice, how youth leadership is shaping the future of high school sports. And today's students are not just participants, they are leaders. They are advocates and creators of the culture around sports and activities throughout the state of Washington. Schools are seeing increased student involvement in decision-making, team policies, social impact, mental health initiatives. It's incredible to see what young people are bringing to sports now and how creative it can be. And we want to talk about what that means for the students and how that can create a better opportunity for all young people participating in sports. So, Mick, my first question to you is, we talk about student athletes and the student, quote unquote, the student athlete voice. What does that mean to the executive director of the WIAA? And how has the student athlete voice evolved over the past decade or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it means is students speaking for themselves, not having people speak for them. And even more so than that, more individual student voices and not just a few elected leaders. And so I know around the state, we see a lot of sportsmanship and leadership classes being hosted now. There's grant funding throughout the state from different WI districts. And we get some grant funding from the National Federation of High Schools, and bring students together and let them talk about some of these issues. I'll tell you probably the most impactful that I've seen firsthand was during COVID. And for a while, we're meeting with our board every week and trying to come up with policies and procedures. And I was trying to remember the specific topics with that today, but I remember two instances where our board, the adults, were thinking like we do as adults, and we were headed a direction on a decision, and the students were invited into the conversation when we were doing them all via Zoom, right? Better access. I think that's probably the biggest change we've seen in the last 5 years. And students actually completely redirected that decision based on their input because it was thoughtful and it was articulated well. And it was sincere. And so the athlete voice, the student athlete voice, came through loud and clear. So I think the challenge we've had since COVID with students back in school is how do you maintain that opportunity for students to be in the room on a regular basis while they're going to school. So I think that's probably been the biggest challenge. But some of our leagues and some of our WI districts have done a really good job with creating access points.
I'm sure we'll talk about this over the next two segments, but it seems like since the pandemic, the stigma around mental health certainly has changed, not only in our country, but also throughout sports. And we've seen athletes from Naomi Osaka, the tennis player, or the gymnast, and why she's in every commercial. I don't know why I'm having a hard time with her name. But a lot of these athletes nowadays, both male and female, are really starting to speak about the fact of their mental health challenges. And I believe this is something that really is starting to seep down into the high school level as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are very in tune with their emotional, and mental health. and more willing that there's not the stigma like there once was to talk about it and to seek help. And so I think because of that, it's been normalized to talk about it. And yeah, students, I mean, student athletes are fail. I mean, we've talked about this numerous times, but we're asking them to go out there and compete and fail publicly. And now we've amplified it by everybody having a recording device in their hand and a platform that can be put over the whole world. There's a lot of added pressure with that. I mean, you think about all the stupid things we said as kids, and now that can be recorded and never go away. It's bad enough when a few people with you heard it and called you out on it, and then, you have the ability to change that. But that's not there. And so how do you deal with that as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, that you make a mistake and you never get away from it? I mean, that's significant.
It's really interesting. I was in all of the proliferation now. It seems like everybody's got stuff on social media, and I probably spend too much time catching up with all of the stuff on social media and all of the different posts that come up on Facebook. I've actually got into the practice of turning my phone off for a couple hours every day, so I stopped looking at it. But I was watching one very, very interesting interview with a gentleman who was in jail, who happened to be a Black male, and he was talking about his life, and they asked him, what do you wish you could have done differently? And he said, I wish I could have talked to somebody. But he said, the first thing he said was, I didn't play organized sports. I didn't have a coach to talk to, but I wish somebody would have talked to me about the fact that I had an alcoholic father. I had a mother who was on drugs. I had all these different challenges and people around me, and I got caught up in it. And if someone could have talked to me, I felt that I could have been helped. And I felt that he was speaking directly to us as coaches. And I know you have had your run-ins with some of your strong-willed athletes, as have I, but sometimes the kids are looking for that person who they can sit down and work with them on the challenges that they're going through. And it really does speak to the dynamic that the students are looking for in this environment.
Absolutely. And now, so much, again, the beauty of technology is those people are readily available. And so, for support, we just signed an agreement with the University of Washington, Dr. Herring, who's been prominent in concussion training. Yep. They're now working on some mental health initiatives at University of Washington, to where we said, hey, we'll help solicit to see if there are students and coaches and individuals interested in being a part of that. And then they go to work from there. We get out of the way and let them do their magic. But I mean, it's gotten to that point where, his original deep dive was concussions, and the mental health has. And that's, we know coaches are the key to that. I mean, for me, that's sports were an oasis away from some of the things you just shared. And when I got to high school, a guy who is still uncle to the family, is at every holiday. He was one of those coaches that was that person for me until my dad got squared away and was able to help. And so, I think back like how lucky I was to run into him when I did. And we have thousands of coaches who have the ability to have that impact. And so we're working on, what can we do to prepare them? And that's where the student voice comes in, is what do kids really want and what do they need? And instead of us telling them what they should want and what they should need, asking students specifically, what does that look like? And so a few people who've gone through that experience can answer it. But we have tens of thousands of kids right now who could help with that. And that's like what Dr. Herring and his team are wanting to do at the University of Washington, is to create a program that students want to be engaged in and they believe will help them. So, I think student voice is critical. We all have best intent, but it doesn't do any good if we don't do it right. And the kids can tell us what really right looks like for them.
You and I have talked so many times, and I'm sure as we move forward throughout this year of WIAA Primetime, we talk about the nature of athletics in the public school versus private school, and it just seems like sometimes our culture is so caught up in the wins and losses. And I had another conversation about how players are at a certain school and not another one, and I said I told the parents, I said it's you guys are more concerned about the winning. When that team was still bad, they were probably recruiting people you didn't care, but when they won, everyone cares. And our focus immediately jumps to the college aspect of athletics and the professional aspect of athletics. And you and I have both coached it, and it's almost accepted sometimes. But I tell you, Mick, and having coached at public schools, and certainly with my son at a private school now, the expectation of what he has to do to participate in that sport, and the skills that are coming out of it, and the responsibility, the maturity and the leadership, his ability now to speak with his own college coaches as he started his own recruiting for looking at different options of where he's going to school. And I'm glad that and it goes beyond the wins and losses, it goes beyond the scoreboard, and we always talk about that. But the bottom line issue is that different coaches who have spoken to my son, the first thing they tell me is that, Juan, this is a incredibly mature young man. And I respond to them, thank goodness his mother is raising him. But the bottom line issue is that as a parent who is looking to make sure that their kid is having a good experience, and also administrators and for the schools, Mick, the expectation around what we get as participants, what our children get as participants, should that be a statewide expectation if they participate in a high school sport, that they're going to have an experience that is going to lead to a character development or a trait that they can take with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think in an ideal world, absolutely. And it could be music, could be forensics, I mean, could be theater, where they're doing something, they're part of something else besides, get away from a screen in isolation. I think absolutely it should be, and there's data that supports it. I've been meeting with senators and representatives on the education and K-12 committee and pitching the idea that part of basic ed funding should include funding for extended day activities to help make sure that the band gets to keep playing. So if you're in an area where families can't afford all the equipment, instruments and uniforms, which in marching band is incredibly expensive, or whether it's an actual athletic event, that there's some basic ed funding, because there's a plethora of data that shows the advantage of that. But even more important are the soft skills that kids get from that we use every single day in our professional and personal lives. So yeah, you hear about some private schools are able to mandate that. Like, you're gonna be in some activity, you gotta do something, even if it's a club of sport or activity of some kind, just for the holistic growth of a child.
Developing soft skills and skills that can actually go out and maintain and take your place in society is what participation in all of these activities is all about. And every Tuesday we speak to that. This is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I'm Juan Cotto, Radio Avenue Radio personality and host of a variety of different programs, including Juan on Rainier. We are going to be having Juan on Rainier coming back next week. And actually, we had an interesting interview with Brandy Cruz, who has done a variety of different things. She was on Cairo Radio, where she got her start. She was on television at Channel 13. Has taken a more conservative bent towards her media and how she has been articulating the value of politics in our community. And we had a great conversation with her, and that's going to be coming up tomorrow on Juan on Rainier, which I believe is at 7:30 on Wednesdays. Daniel, I'm sure you will clue me on the right time. And of course, thank you very much. If you are into politicking, and we have been politicking, Rainier Avenue Radio, Tony B, has had a variety of different shows. And I believe that we certainly have to be considered one of the leaders when you are looking at the news and they're using our video and they're using our quotes and they're using our information. I believe that Rainier Avenue Radio, number one, we did it first. We got out there with our community election connection night events. And obviously next week is election day. So all that stuff that filled up your mailbox last week, you can, number one, I hope you put it into the proper recycling bin. Hope you read a little bit of it so you can make an informed decision. And we're encouraging everybody to vote. And I believe yesterday was the last day to register to vote. So if you have not registered, number one, get yourself registered so you can vote in the future. That's a hallmark of a engaged community. But next Tuesday night, I believe Rainier Avenue Radio will be having an election special, and I bet you Daniel Bellis and Juan Cotto will probably be a part of that. So stay tuned on your community radio station. Governance and policy. Does the WIAA have formal mechanisms for gathering student input when developing or modifying athletic policy?
Yeah, we actually have our own student leadership program, 16 students called LEAP. We bring in 8 juniors every year, and then they stay with us for 2 years. So, and the big part of that is educating them on the system, like how's the system work? So similar to what you get in your U.S. history or civics class, like how do these elections work? Why should I vote next Tuesday? Like what am I voting on? What's an initiative? So we do that with our students, and then provide input, and then they come from around the state. So we have the all 6 geographical regions represented, and then they're expected to go out and solicit from students and bring that voice back. So we have them look at the amendments and give an advisory vote that the 16 of them then provide to the voting membership. We'll give them hot topics. We're talking right now a lot around sportsmanship and those kinds of things, and get like, do they think there's a problem? The adults think there's a problem. Do you think there's a problem? And what is the problem if there is a problem? And how do you think we could solve it? And again, they're a lot more innovative and creative than most of us. So we get stuck in our ways or know what we know. And that group of 16 students, they meet 5 to 6 times a year as a group, and then they do some one-off. They come work some of our events, so we get some informal time with them, and they get some informal time with our board members to be able to provide, informal feedback as well. So that's how we've done it.
Mick, and you and I have discussed this before, and you touched on it. I'll be a little stronger. It seems like some of the adults that I've spoken to recently, they get over emotional. They almost become emotionally charged with these issues that we see in high school athletics. And sometimes it can really be an absolute shame to hear adults get that emotional. And I guess there's a part of me that gets it because it's their kids. A lot of it is because they participated before, and they either feel or they don't feel the process is quote unquote fair. But you're right. It seems like the kids themselves, when you sit down and talk with them, and I've had several conversations with some of the kids over the last couple of weeks at both public and private schools, and they're so mature about it. They want to face good competition. There's kids who are kind of like, something we don't mind going up against O'Day. We know it's shorthand, but that kind of makes it fun, which was a surprise to me. It seemed like they want to go ahead and lace it up. And I thought that, for example, the West Seattle kids did a fantastic job going against O'Day the other night, and kept themselves in the ball game for a long period of time. And O'Day eventually wears teams down like they usually do. But there was not one West Seattle participant who was walking off the field said, "Oh, I wish we didn't play him, and I wish we didn't have to play him." That was more of the parents who were making those kind of statements. I'm wondering if there's a time that we could start to envision a student advisory council with far more influence in some of these types of decisions because of the maturity that these athletes who are participating and in the activities are starting to display.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, that's been an ongoing discussion we've had. We're just trying to figure out how to make that happen logistically. I mean, we have 13 voting members and I think 19 non-voting members, adults. And if we gave them a really tough quiz on how the WIAA works. And most of them work, they're in schools, either as principals or athletic directors, coaches. It might be like a 70-75% average on the detail stuff. Most of them have a really strong understanding of the general role and their role as administrators, but as far as some of it. And so that's, to have students prepared and not have them out of school, so much, and to be able to gather them around the state. So we've tried to figure out how we can use technology to do that. During the school days, difficult. Most of the students who would be involved are athletes. So then it's like, well, do we ask them to meet at 6 a.m. when we're looking at late start schools? When we've met with them late at night, they're usually willing, but how frequent could we do that? So it's really been the biggest challenge has been the logistics of it. And so we've tried to find other ways to bring their voice. And I'll be honest, we're very marginal at this right now. We have not cracked the code yet on how to do it better. So it's definitely an ongoing discussion. We have an internal meeting of our leadership team, and it's a standing agenda item to see what we can come up with. So we're always poking around and adding little tidbits, but to have an actual full meeting would be fantastic if we could prepare them enough to actually come in and do the work. So
Stripes Cotto has decided to join us, Mick Hoffman.
I love it.
Looking for a little bit of kibble for lunch, and letting me know that she loves the topics that we discuss. But certainly, when we go to break, she's going to get a snack on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. I was also going to say that that's the beautiful thing about having high school kids involved. As far as a meeting standpoint, all you got to do is get a couple of big pizzas, and you'll get an engaged commitment from the students, won't you?
Yeah, I mean, they are always willing. They come to the office 5 times a year, and that's from all corners of the state. And so their parents are committed, sometimes driving them, especially if they're coming solo, long distance. So it's a big commitment to be able to do that. And our board meetings, they're held in Renton, and we've tried to get students there. And even for that, a lot of the meetings are on Sundays. Occasionally we'll meet on a Monday, and again, for them to be able to be there and justify missing school time. So that's been our greatest challenge. But I'm telling you, during COVID, it moved the needle on some very difficult conversations and topics. So it's something we have to get better at.
The discussion around NIL, discussion around the college athletes and the types of opportunities they have, the type of money and the numbers, the astronomical numbers, the fact that they're getting rid of coaches at an astonishing rate and these unbelievable buyouts. James Franklin, Brian Kelly down at Louisiana State University. I mean, they're walking away from coaching, and they're being forced out and getting paid money that one can only dream about. And the NIL conversations are starting to grow. And I believe it was the coach at the University of Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, today, and he's just saying that this is all getting out of hand. And I'm just wondering, how might the WIAA include student leaders in shaping the conversation and shaping the approach before issues emerge? And I'm sure, and once again, you and I've had this conversation before. I'm not sure how this is going to be impacted at the high school level, but I feel like a time is coming.
Yeah, I mean, right now our kids have the right to make money off NIL. They just can't connect it to their school. So for a student who has a name, an image, or likeness that people see as valuable to their product, it's there right now. We haven't seen a level of abuse. The concern would be if they started connecting it to their schools, and certain schools might be able to drive that, similar to what we see at college. So yeah, at this point, our rule did not have to change. It was the same. And to date, students aren't really talking much about it. I mean, some of them getting some free burgers. There's some, a little bit bigger deals here and there. To date, it's been a non-factor. Paula was playing right now. there'd be that unicorn in a little different scenario. But yeah, for us, NIL, knock on wood, has not, kids have right to work. And so it needs to be their name, image, and likeness, and not their school.
Explain to me how that works. So does the company that would like to engage with a high school athlete, let's go back to 2021 again. If Paulo were a senior in high school, does the company or does the group go directly to him or his representatives and make that approach and cut a deal there, or is it something that the WIAA has to oversee in regards to that?
No, we're not involved in it really at all, as because our rule says they can work. It's no different if Juan Cotto wanted to be a model or he wants to be a spokesman for Arctic Circle. You get to do that. If you're Juan Cotto, the starting pitcher for O'Day, that's an issue. Or you're in your uniform, then it becomes a WI issue. Honestly, our concern more so is, and this is where we've started to have conversations with different groups where we might be able to help our students around NIL, is education, because there are people who have formed companies and what they want to do is get connected with students directly, like what you said, and become agents essentially. And so they go out and they get them a couple $1,000 for an NIL deal. And then from there, they want to start talking about managing that student and eventually being an agent. And now with the possibilities at the collegiate level, you don't necessarily need to be a professional athlete to need an agent. And then the other piece is around the education-based athletic with this is whatever those students get, are they geared up for taxes and everything else? Because now they become businesses, right? And so making sure that whoever's working with them or advising them is not their one to take a large percent of that money. And then number two, make sure they're preparing that student and family for all the responsibilities that come with making that money. So that's something. And again, currently it's the schools because it's their students. That's not a responsibility of the WIA, but that part of the conversation has started in an attempt to maybe try to help protect kids from predatory type behavior around the finances.
Is that a point of conversation, or is it something that you would be worried about as the executive director? The fact that, for example, I mean, at the school that my student attends, and certainly my wife and I, we both have master's degrees. I think if Clemente were to start to be afforded that type of opportunity, we could certainly feel comfortable handling the debate. We also know in other places, and certainly where I coached at Highline, for example, a lot of the kids were emancipated. They had grandparents taking care of them. They had a lot of them. They were almost taking care of themselves. And I was just wondering, in that type of a situation where the kids may not have the people around them, has the WIAA started to consider making sure that the kids would have adequate representation?
Yeah, I mean, that's, to date, again, our role, that's not our place, but again, as you talk about evolving, and is that who is filling that space? And we're hoping it's the schools, but what can we do to help schools have resources to be able to do that for their students? So, that's one of the things I fight as a school guy. Like, you want to be the one doing that direct support and services for kids. But that's, as a governance agency, that's not necessarily what our role is. So we're really trying to become more of as much service as we are governance. But at the same time, there's only so far we can go. So we have, we get approached a lot by people who want to get connected to kids. And what we want to do is make sure that anything that gets passed along to our schools to possibly introduce to our students is somebody we would want. I mean, I have a former player who, has been doing this since he got out of college, so being there 20 years. And some of the stories he told me of some of these professional athletes. So you're talking young adults who were totally taken advantage of by family, friends, and strangers as part of their, and when the money became real. And if we start seeing that at the high school level, we definitely need to work with our membership. It's just how do we go about doing that? So those conversations are starting. There's a lot of people willing to help out with that. The issue is, how do we screen them to figure out who really is in it for the right reason, who's there for more so than, their fair share.
Only so far we can go, and being in it for the right reasons. And right now we have to have one of those profit center breaks on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Daniel, we'll see you in 3 minutes.
Speak up, Seattle. We are Rainier Avenue Radio.world, the station that cares.
Don't forget. So I needed to check my kids' immunization records for their school. My doctor told me I could get them quickly online, but I couldn't figure out how. Thankfully, I could turn to Link to Care WA for help. With Link to Care WA, I was able to learn how to use online health portals, use telehealth to talk to my doctor virtually, and even apply for jobs online. I called their free hotline and got help from a real person. Call Link to Care WA at 866-757-1832 or visit linktocarewa.org.
Hey, community. Listen to New Hope Missionary Baptist Church every Sunday, 10:45 a.m.
We invite you to get up and call a friend and tell them that New Hope is on live. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And now, our pastor, the Reverend Dr. Robert L. Jeffrey Sr. Everybody clap your hand, come on.
Listen to New Hope Missionary Baptist Church every Sunday, 10:45 a.m.
Happy Hump Day. We're excited that you decided to join us for the party. Fresh Juice is live Wednesday night, 9 to 11 p.m. Pacific time on Seattle's Rainier Avenue Radio with the Juice Fest, including me, Superstar TK, Einstein Patron, and D-Money. We're going to chop it up with some cool people, play some really dope new hip-hop and R&B music, some games, and maybe even a live performance. Lock us in right now on Fresh Juice YouTube page at youtube.com/@Fresh Juice Media, or subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Music. Fresh Juice.
A new law is helping people save more money on prescription drug costs. You may also be able to save with Medicare's Extra Help program. Your premium cost can be zero and your out-of-pocket expenses are low. Who should apply? Single individuals earning less than $23,000 a year, or married couples earning less than $31,000 a year. Even if you don't think you qualify, you should still check out this program. Visit ssa.gov/extra help. Medicare costs are covered by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
You know you can't get enough of Rainier Avenue Radio.
Welcome back to our community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, where we have this conversation every other Tuesday. I believe it's the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month with Mick Hoffman, the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, Rainier Avenue Radio. Once again, bringing you so many different ways to be engaged in your community, and also just different ways to be engaged in public broadcasting and getting the word out for different things that you're doing. If you like world music, we have it. If you like conversation, we have it. And of course, if you like politics, we have it here on Rainier Avenue Radio. We have a little Venmo tag that you see up there on the upper left-hand corner. People like Mick Hoffman and I, we are not compensated for these conversations because we believe that they're so important for the public. But to have a channel where we can go ahead and have this conversation is so important. So we would encourage you to support Rainier Avenue Radio. If you like politics, obviously, a lot of us do in the community. We think that's an important part of an engaged community. I think there's three things if you look at an engaged community. One is voting. Number two is jury duty. Number three is donating blood. course, as the Government Affairs Director of the Blood Center, I would highly encourage you to participate in that. But we encourage people to vote. And next week, as a part of the Community Election Connection, we have so many great political shows and so many different ways that you can learn about the candidates who are running. And in this community here in Seattle, like communities across the country, some major decisions are going to be made next week in this off-year election, including the race for mayor, King County Executive, a city council seat, two citywide council seats, our city attorney here in the city of Seattle. But I'm sure in whatever community you're in, it is so important that you get out and you go ahead and exercise your right to vote. And we hope that you hit the last Monday, October 27th, I believe, yesterday was the last day to register to vote. And we hope that people did that. And we hope that you will exercise your right to participate by getting a ballot and making the choice to vote. We believe it's that important. So you can find out about that information here. There are a number of recorded interviews. I do a radio show or a talk show called Juan on Rainier, where we talk to a lot of political types and movers and shakers to get their opinions on things going in the community. And Mick Hoffman talked about the modeling career, and I think for septuagenarians and octogenarian women, a lot of people find me handsome in that age range, so that's not yet out of the question, Mick. Once again, we are with Mick Hoffman, the Executive Director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. And here we are on this little, I always joke that it's a little digital community radio show. And then I go to Safeway and someone says, "Hey, I recognize you from Rainier Avenue Radio." It's phenomenal. Digital culture and representation in an era where athletes are content creators. How does student voice responsibly intersect with school branding, sportsmanship, and digital ethics? Are we having some conversation about those areas?
Yeah, going back to our LEAP students, we bring them out. They come out and work a lot of our events and do a lot of our social media for us. So if you don't follow any of our social media, it's been developed and refined over the years, but it's one of the best throughout the country. Our staff gets asked to speak all the time at national events. Arizona just tried to recruit away a couple of our people for their social media. So we're pretty proud of that. And a big piece is that they bring in those students and student voice through that. And so there's sometimes at events that they actually are completely turn that over. And we have students going around capturing images and deciding what to post of other student participants. So I think that's a big piece. I know a lot of our schools are using different tools. One of our partners, the NFHS network, they've set up now where they've purchased Max Preps, and they've actually created some tools where you can go on there and take clips and automatically post that. And schools are starting to use more students with that. So I love the fact that we're finding ways to have students positively engage with that kind of technology at the same time, shutting some of it down during the school day. So there's a distinct difference between when and how to access social media, and hopefully just through those types of experiences that help. So unfortunately, on the flip side, we deal with conflicts between schools about inappropriate stuff being posted from kids, and, the schools work through that with them. And there's more and more digital classes being developed around the ethics of that. So I don't see that one getting easier, especially with AI and some of the crazy stuff that can be created now that looks so real and is not. So it definitely is going to become a greater challenge as the technology improves.
Daniel, I don't know if you can find it on Facebook, one of my recent Facebook posts. I'll tell you, Mick, on Saturday morning, my son he's a part of the Mariners Hometown 9 program. And there was a $500 scholarship or reward for students that wanted to do an interview for the program. And a lot of the students felt unbelievably uncomfortable getting in front of the camera and doing an interview. But let's say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. When they asked Mente if he would do it, he got out of his cell phone, put his phone in his pocket, took his hands out of his pocket, and he went ahead and jumped right in front of the camera and started answering questions. And as a parent, you're kind of proud because not only was he poised and was he confident, but he had some really interesting things to say in the interview. And I was just, geez, what did this kid get from me? He's got so much going from his mother. There's a picture of him in front of the camera at El Centro de la Raza doing the interview. And obviously, as a parent, you're incredibly proud. I was wondering, are we preparing our student athletes, or is the WIAA looking at, or the schools looking at preparing our athletes to amplify their voice? And you mentioned the consequences. I mean, we want to see it in a good sense. But are we looking at different ways that we're getting the kids the training to present themselves in front of the media for the good of their school and for the good of our community sports in general?
Yeah, probably not enough. I mean, some of our schools have developed a common term as SALT, the Student Athlete Leadership Teams. So we have our ASBs and our typical leadership. So we've seen several schools start developing the SALT programs specifically for student athletes, and they focus more on student athlete centric topics, such as dealing with the media, such as dealing, they're trying to get them to go and do some community service and support other programs outside of athletics. But in addition, something specific to them. So, ideally, when we went to this core 24, and you need 24 credits to graduate, and we upped the math and the science, these are the kinds of things that slip away in some programs. And sometimes, it's students who have to fill those, have to retake some classes or don't get the grade they want. So they retake a class to improve the grade. So they miss out on these type of classroom opportunities. So some schools do them early in the morning, some do them in the afternoon, some do them at lunch to try to give access. So, we have some schools knocking it out of the park. There's another one. We partnered with a group, Proactive Coaching. We've talked about Bruce Brown quite a bit, and Rob Miller. They partnered with a group called Neptune. And so Neptune started as providing music that's been screened, that is school friendly, but they created a program called Neptune Navigate. And they essentially took Bruce's training materials, student leadership, and they put it digitally with a variety of adults kind of leading the lesson. And we did a partnership with them so we could get the price reduced for schools. And man, it is really, really good stuff. And because it's done digitally, teams can do it individually. Students can do it individually. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. So we've tried to go out and find some resources to give flexibility to any school to be able to do it. So,
well, anything that Bruce Brown is involved in is always high quality and it's first class, and it's also has a positive impact on students. So that's really exciting to hear.
Yeah, it is it's called Neptune Navigate, and it is really, you used to go hear him speak and you get all fired up. And you're like, that's what we got to do for our kids. This will help students, find a way to lead and the things you and I are talking about today. And then, then it's like, oh geez, I got to go supervise 3 games. I got to meet with this coach. I need to get out to practice. I got to make sure the soccer goals are set up right. And where's the time to build it? Well, they built it. So now you just got to find the time to implement it. And coaches can do it with their students. So it's not, the AD or one person running it like typically SALT or something like that works. So we've tried to bring tools, inside out coaching. Joe Ehrman, Jody Redmond. Mm-hmm. Again, why do I coach? Why do I coach the way I do? So we've brought that to the state for free to schools. And the Seahawks just hosted an event, and I think we had 13 schools come in and spend the day with they could bring as many students as they want, and that they were able to do it. So if they engaged over the last 3 years in the programming, they got this event with the Seahawks at Lumen Field. So we've tried to find some partners that don't cost money in today's world with schools or limit the cost and impact large volumes of students. So we're starting to make some progress with it. Like I said, it's a growing need identified, and students get to be involved in that entire process. So adults are bringing this forward. Now we need the students to bring it forward. So
students participating in growing needs and working with parents and working with administrators, hopefully keeping athletics strong in the state of Washington. He is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I'm Juan, Cotto, Rainier Avenue Radio host and personality, and this is WIAA Primetime, which we do on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month to discuss issues in high school sports throughout the state of Washington, and it is always an engaging conversation. And we thank Mick Hoffman for joining us on the Tuesdays that he is here. Equity, access, and fairness. One of the things I was so thrilled about, my brother Mick, my son, my mom had three boys. They went to three different high schools. I was O'Day Fighting Irish. My brother Andy was a Rainier Beach Viking, and then my youngest brother Jose was bused in the early 1980s out to West Seattle to keep the schools balanced. And he's a very, very proud West Seattle Wildcat, although he occasionally uses the other name that is no longer in use. But it was great to see going into the game that West Seattle was ranked, and I know there was some scuttlebutt from some of my good friends, and they were like, "Oh, West Seattle isn't that good," and blah 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 blah. But the bottom line issue is that I love the RPI polls that the WIAA puts out, because it does give some of the smaller schools, and it gives some of the schools that may not be recognized for having outstanding seasons, it puts them up there. And I think within that community, when they see that their school is up there, that's kind of cool to me. And it's kind of exciting. And I just wonder, how can we ensure that the student athlete voice isn't limited to the highest profile schools or sports, but includes athletes from every region, and also from the sports that we might not hear, or the activities that we don't hear much about.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we tried, I don't know if you follow our Athlete of the Week much, but that is a very eclectic group of athletes from all around the state. I'll comment, it's not unusual for me to get an email from a coach or a superintendent from a small district saying, "I can't believe that you guys knew about XYZ." And so for us, we're very intentional in trying to seek that out. And, of our 295 school districts, they're all really different, and 400 plus high schools. So we work at that. We have a group of staff that meet every single week to look at any and all submissions. And, as they're going through it, they're pulling out the best and then making sure that we're covering the gamut of our schools with that. So nothing's going to be a sympathy. Well, we don't have anybody from Eastern Washington, so we're going to not give it to a really deserving kid. We have more deserving kids than we can do. So that's one way we do it, which then gives those kids a platform to take on leadership possibly in their areas and become, even more of a leader than what they already are. So that's one. And again, I go back to our LEAP representation. That again comes from across the state. When we did the two classes, you talk about students and mental health and impact. We built two classes. We got a grant from the Susan Crown Exchange. We partnered with the University of Washington Center for Leadership and Athletics, and two classes were built, and students and coaches built those classes. They're the ones who provided the feedback. They're the ones who helped with the rewrites, and both those classes now are not only available for free. So, when you talk about community education, those classes are free classes. You can get them on 24/7 Ed. And they're also available on the NFHS now at no cost. So we have them available nationally, and it's around what we talked about with proactive and inside out coaching, really looking at how you work with young people. And young people were the ones who told the authors of those classes how they want to be coached, what works and what doesn't work. Not 40 years ago when I was a kid, but what works in 2025 with kids today. And so we're really trying to involve them in our committees and those kinds of work, especially for something that's going to be a direct service to students. So I guess, that's why we do it. And we put out all calls across the state, and we track where we're getting interest from. And then we reach out to fill in the gaps. And so, that's one thing I love about our staff is they're very intentional. Or that's an expectation of our board, and that's a regular practice of our staff is to go out and seek representation from all aspects of our student bodies.
Mick, if you can, and I would find this interesting. What are students saying? I mean, I know 40 years ago when we were being coached, I mean, it was guys who'd had coaches that had come out of the military. And it was a lot of yes sir, and it was a lot of sometimes you get your tail chewed on. If I can think about my best friends at O'Day at the time, we needed that. we needed to have our tails chewed on a little bit. Some of us still need to have our tails chewed on a little bit. But tell us, what does that look like now? What are the kids saying in terms of the participation of student athlete and also the communication with coaches nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that's been great to see is our kids are a lot tougher than I think we give them credit for. They want structure. Right. They want that. They also want to understand why. I mean, that's something in today's world. Like, we used to be a coach said, hey, we're going to do X, Y, Z. Why? Now they need to take the time to explain that. They also want coaches that care about them first and foremost. We hear the cliches. They don't care about how much you know till they know how much you care. And, in the old school coaching, you had to find that in that coach somehow, some way, or hope to see it. And, people are done with that kind of mentality for the most part. Like, you got to show them a little bit. And, that's what's awesome about somebody like Monte or some of these other coaches that have been around for 30 plus years is that they have found a way to adapt to students through the decades. I think you have to find a way to give kids voice without losing control. And, the good coaches can do that. And the people who struggle coaching and teaching can't. They lose control. So I think a lot of the kind of questions that you've brought forward for us to discuss today are what good coaches do today. It takes a little more time, takes a little more patience. You can't be a control freak, right? You get more control by giving up direct control, essentially. And kids will buy in, they believe you. And if they know who you are and you're in it for the right reasons, they're going to absolutely love you. And when you're there at the tough times. And so too often, if you're there to pad a resume and you're not going to get enough wins in that program, they don't want to do it. But when they understand the why, our kids are tough and they deal with way more stuff than we did. And they're thriving. And so I think we underestimate their abilities at times.
I'll tell you, that's one of the interesting things that I get to see on a weekly basis when I see Monty Kohler, Al Roberts, Stafford Mays, Mike Crotty, and they are, I mean, it really is, they are the oldest coaching staff, I believe, in the country at any level. All guys, I think Monty's approaching 70. I think Stafford may be 70. I think that Crotty's now 70, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm thinking right, Al is 81 or 82 now. But to be able to connect with the current high school student is a real generational task, and they do it well. They do it well, and they speak to kids, I think, far differently than they did. And I think it's safe to say 50 years ago when they first started coaching.
Yeah. And some coaches are still coaching them hard, but they also are doing things where they know they love them. I mean, look at Rainier Beach basketball boys. I mean, Mike coaches. He's telling them, right? But you can tell he loves his kids, and he has great passion for his work. He's incredibly knowledgeable. So you put those three things together, and the relationship and the things that he does with his students that none of us get to see. You get to see the results of that, and it's not just having great talent. There's a lot of teams with great talent that don't win. And, when you can get kids that come together and play hard for each other and themselves under a lot of pressure. So I think there's a lot of really, really good role model coaches from around the state that do that with students where, you see them, listen to them. There's also, who's in charge at the end of the day. And they trust and they believe that because coach has built that relationship and shown that love consistently.
Mick, let's fast forward 10 years. And then let's assume that you and I will still be having these conversations 10 years from now. What role do you believe the student athlete will play in shaping how high school sports are governed in the state of Washington?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And when I saw that one, I was trying to think, okay, what can I predict in 10 years, trying to think back 10 years. And I think with the accessibility of information and communication tools, I could see students being a part of our board. Definitely at the regional and local level where it's a little bit easier for them to access, but with technology, even at the state level, I think the delivery of education will be so different that having to be in a brick and mortar school Monday through Friday won't necessarily be as much of a requirement, that they would have the flexibility to be able to travel a little bit to be a part of in-person meetings as well. And so I could see the student voice being greatly amplified over the next few years in the actual roles from not only the rule making, but the rule enforcement. And to see, kind of that underbelly of what we deal with when there are violations and that, but to have students in the room and adults being accountable to them, like the students are accountable to their coaches and other adults today. So I could see that happening in 10 years.
Mick, I want to go back to the top of the conversation where I joked about the Mariners, but I was at the game against Toronto when we won the last game. I was at the 15-inning game against Detroit, and when you walk out of the stadium after that type of a game, and the people are just going nuts, and there is so much goodwill. I mean, it totally separates out the politics. It totally separates out rich versus poor. As people from all over the region, and people are just so excited. What brings communities closer together than sports? It is such a unique thing to be a part of it at whatever level. I mean, we've seen it at state championships. We've seen it at district championships. I mean, actually, I just remember one night when I was at Highline, it was one of the 3 games we won one year when we beat Renton for their 100th year homecoming, and we were the marked opponent. We were the easy victory, and we won that football game. And just the community and the emails that I got from people and parents. But what brings a community together better than sports? And you witnessed it during that Mariners playoff run.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything, honestly. I mean, you have a common commitment, and that's your school or your team, like the Mariners. People in Seattle are predominantly going to be Mariner fans. So you have a common goal, you have a common scoreboard, and nothing else matters other than that result, right? You commiserate together, you celebrate together. That's the beauty of sports. And unfortunately, we're letting other issues divide us within our own communities. Whether it's our kids' playing time, whether it's the offense the coach is deciding to run, whether it's who made the team. And again, think about that with the Mariners. Yeah, you had all that noise, but how much noise was on the radio? How many people were questioning Manager Wilson? How many people were questioning the front office throughout the year? So you're going to have that. But when you can bring all that together for that common event, and I think that's probably something for schools that we can do. We don't take advantage of that celebration point. We've been talking about that as a staff. Like, how do we celebrate? What are our wins as a WIAA staff, and how do we celebrate them? Or do we just got that state tournament done? We got through that eligibility season, thank goodness, and on to, like, you got to have a common scoreboard, and you got to have a way to celebrate wins. And I think that's where one place that schools and the WIAA can get better at.
My good friend Scott Ligo, who's got a couple of messages he has sent to us today. He when he was at Garfield High School, it was one of the things I learned from Scott was learning to define your own victories, because sometimes those are going to be the victories that you judge your entire season on. Mick, thank you so much. We appreciate you so much for taking the time to join us at each one of these sessions. We appreciate it so much. Daniel, thank you so much for being a true superstar back there and keeping the show running smoothly. And we will see you in a couple of weeks on the second Tuesday of the month, Mick.
Great. Hey, Juan, appreciate you getting us organized and thinking for us. So, easy to show up and talk.
And we will see you on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio. World. Right, Cotto. I'm Juan Cotto.